Welcome to She Leads, the podcast where I sit down with remarkable women that I've personally met or looked up to and who've inspired me through their stories, their success and resilience. What have I learned along the way? It's never all butterflies and rainbows. Behind every achievement, there are challenges, there are setbacks, and moments of uncertainty. Take today's guest, Stacy Anderson, who just 4 months ago has been laid off from her role as a deputy managing director at a leading multinational agency. A moment that could have knocked down anyone. And I can really relate to that, having experienced a layoff twice in my own career. It's tough, it's humbling, and it forces you to reimagine what comes next. Stacy, welcome to She Leads, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me today.
How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you.
So, Stacy, what was going through your mind when you first received the news about the layoff?
So I actually wasn't too surprised, to be quite honest with you, because I was a part of the process in terms of choosing people to be made redundant. So it was actually a wider layoff, and more people other than myself were unfortunately laid off. However, at the same time, I still was in a bit of denial, thinking, oh, this isn't going to happen to me, because I was a part of the process in selecting who should be made redundant, which, by the way, it was largely due to a restructuration as well as financial constraints. And so as time went on, after I kind of selected the people to be made redundant, I just had a pit in my stomach, and I started to feel like, gosh, I could be on that list too. I was new to the job. I had started at the beginning of the year, and at this point in time, it was in July. And so basically that was only 7 months' time, and I knew that I had a high salary, which meant that because it was due to financial constraints, I could easily be on the chopping block. But I really didn't want to succumb to it, because when I started the job, I was fresh off of a maternity leave, and I was really excited about starting this job. I actually wasn't looking when I took the position. I was headhunted for the role, which was another reason why I was a little bit in denial that it could be me, right? Because they had completely sent out a global recruitment to fill this particular position. I knew people in my network in other countries that had even interviewed for the role.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if they headhunted you and they were literally bringing you on board, probably that was the last thing you thought about, that you would be on the list as well.
Well,
and
exactly.
Especially if they appointed you to work on the list of the people who should be made redundant. You probably didn't think that you would be at the end on that list as well. So, yeah.
Exactly. And because one of the things that I know from hiring and leading teams and running an organization is the high cost of recruitment efforts. So it's not cheap to recruit somebody, bring them on board, train them, introduce them to clients. But lo and behold, it happened to me. And funny enough, it happened on July 4th, which is Independence Day in America. So my husband had actually joked that I was liberated. But that being said, it was a very difficult thing for me to accept, because I was so excited going into the role. I hadn't sought out the position. I was fresh off of a maternity leave, eager to get back, to me, get back to working and what I know as an individual. So it was a very shocking thing to deal with, and especially because it had never happened to me before.
Yeah, that's even worse. I mean, as I mentioned, I went twice through a redundancy. The first time, it's a bit of a shock, but then the second time, you've already been through that, so you know the challenges, you know the feelings. But I can understand that the first time has hit you pretty bad. So how did you overcome these challenges, or how did you feel? Can you
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I basically went into a bit of a preservation mode in the sense that I immediately felt like I need to get a new job. I need to find something ASAP, even though I had a gardening leave and a severance package, and I was okay until the end of the year. But my default, because I had never had that happen before, was that I needed to be working. So I decided to take an approach of leveraging my network. I also took it as a moment of inflection in the sense that predominantly my career had been agency side, and I really wanted to move tech side. So I started to meet with different industry leaders at tech companies that I was interested to work at. And, everybody actually also told me, take some time, let it process, be with it for a little bit, and, go through the emotions and take it as a time to also step back and reassess. And so I did do that. Actually, right after it happened, we went to Denmark for a month where we have a house. And so it was a really good time to step away from Dubai and hit the reset button. But that being said, on the more practical side of things, I also decided to invest in upskilling myself. So I took an AI academy through the Section School. And of course, I worked on a new resume and again, just focused on building out what are the things that I want to look for in the next position and in the next company that I work for.
Yeah, I think it's important to take a step back, take a break, think about everything that you have done, and then think about, okay, what you want to do next and what is needed to get there. So, I think it's a very good choices that you have made. But let's take a step back and tell us a little bit more about your journey. Where did you start? Where did you start your career?
So I started my career in Chicago. I actually spent most of my career in the U.S. and it was by coincidence that I ended up in this field. Backing all the way up to college, I originally went to university to study meteorology.
Wow, completely different.
Yes. I was obsessed with science and the weather, maybe also a little bit obsessed with the movie Twister. And, so that really drove the decision behind where I went to university. And in my first year, actually, most of the courses for meteorology were very math focused, and I hated math. And so at the same time, I always liked communication. And fast forward, I ended up transferring schools up to Chicago. And then my last semester of university, I went to study abroad in Rome, Italy.
Nice.
And prior to going, I wanted to save money. And so I found an internship at an advertising agency.
Nice.
And this was a boutique ad agency in Chicago. And I thought, okay, this aligns with my major, which was communications. I took it. It was very interesting and dynamic. I loved the energy and the culture. A lot of their clients were casinos. So I think you could imagine what the vibes were like. And basically, I went to study. And then when I came back, they offered me a full-time position. And I took it because I thought, why not? My parents were living in St. Louis. I didn't want to move back home. And this was my way to start my career in Chicago. And fast forward, here I am 20 years later. I spent 10 years working mainly at agencies and tech startups in Chicago, and then worked at a big agency out of New York for 3 years before coming to Dubai.
Oh, wow. That's quite a great journey, and very, very interesting to see your path and your progress that you've made. Along the roles that you had throughout your career, were there specific challenges you faced as a woman in that field? Because, as you mentioned, you worked in tech startups and tech companies that are usually very male-dominated. Did you face any specific challenges as a woman?
Yes, I did, in fact. The first challenge that I faced was at a tech startup. I reported into a woman, ironically, and as I mentioned, I started my career early because I graduated college early. And one day she took me for coffee and told me that my youthful appearance and good looks were doing nothing for me in the workplace.
Oh, wow.
And I was quite flabbergasted because I did not expect that to be the point of the conversation. It was the first time that I've encountered having somebody say something that's pretty inappropriate, quite frankly, in a work context.
Yeah, that's inappropriate.
And so I took a pause, and then I said, well, there's nothing that I can do about the way that I look. And I would hope that my work speaks louder than my physical appearance. And thank you for sharing your concerns and, your watch outs with me, because I think at the end of the day, she intended to steer me in a right direction. Honestly, I do think that she intended to try and make me know that maybe men were seeing me in the office or things like this. And so that's why I didn't really want to dig too much deeper and thank her for her feedback. But at the same time, I said, I cannot help that I look young, that I graduated early, that I started my career early, that I climbed the ranks quickly. I'm just going to continue focusing on doing the best job that I can, and that will remain my top priority.
Yeah. She probably has seen you as maybe as a competition.
Yeah, possibly.
I can imagine. But yeah, it's really not inappropriate to tell someone that because of their looks, because of the way they dress, that it has an impact on any qualifications or any work that they have done. I have personally experienced similar situations where women were told that they should look nice, especially when they go to meeting, to help to close the deal, which is really, really inappropriate. And I believe it happens more often than we think, or that most people think. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, that's what I think is crazy too, is that, this is coming from a woman, and as women, we should be bolstering each other up.
Exactly.
We should be, having each other's backs and creating a network to promote each other, not potentially tear each other down or bring down one's self-confidence. So I completely agree. It is pretty crazy. And on the flip, I actually had another situation, and this one was driven by men. This one is more recent, where I had a client tell somebody who reported into me, oh, make sure that Stacy comes for the meeting because we love blondes and she's really pretty. And so the person who reported into me told me this, and I was also very stunned because, again, I just didn't expect such commentary to be made. And it struck a chord for a minute because it was so shocking. And I hate the fact that I had to laugh it off. Yeah. And I at first laughed it off, but then I thought to myself, no, I need to stick up and voice that this is an inappropriate comment. Yeah. And fortunately, the person who reported into me, who delivered this message, he completely agreed. He was fully on my side, and he totally understood that it was grossly inappropriate. And, I just took that as, okay, I have to brush it off. But to your point, it's just a shame that women often encounter these situations, and it leaves me wondering, are there women that are too afraid to speak up about these situations, and is it silently bringing down their self-confidence?
I absolutely agree with you. And I have seen similar situation before. And unfortunately, there was also situations where I didn't speak up. And thinking back, I think, I'm sure I should have spoken up. And I think we as women we need to empower each other. And if a situation like this comes up again, we need to talk about it, because most of the time we just stay silent and we don't mention it. But the right thing to do is to speak up, to share it with other people, and make sure that these comments don't come anymore. Because if we make these comments about men, what would happen? First of all, women. I've never heard any woman making any comments about a man that they look pretty. They
make sure he comes because he's so handsome.
Exactly. So,
yeah, but you're right. I mean, women need to speak up, because us remaining silent is almost an acceptance and an approval that people can continue to make such comments.
Exactly. So, yeah, we all need to make sure to stop this, talk about it, and bring it up, and especially point it out that these men, or speak to the men and confront them with these comments, that it's not appropriate and it has to stop. So, given the experience that you had in your previous roles and the challenges that you faced as a woman, what do you believe are the core qualities of an effective leader in today's world, and maybe specifically in the tech industry?
For me, it boils down to transparency and trust, and building an environment of trust. Because when you have an environment of trust, people feel safe to express themselves. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, if there are scenarios that occur that shouldn't occur or are inappropriate, hopefully I have instilled trust within the team that any individual feels that they could come to me and open up and share that with me, and that they would know that I have their back no matter what, and their best interest in mind to deal with it. So I really think that trust is built by having transparency. And so leading with transparency means that, from a operational perspective, you're sharing the vision of the department or the company. You're laying out the goals. You are explaining the why behind different things. And you're making everybody on the team, no matter his or her role or level, feel like they have a claim in it, that they are truly a part of, working towards the greater good to achieve those visions. And having the transparency to acknowledge as well when things are not going okay. And so I really think that when you create a transparent ecosystem of communication, people feel like they can trust and open up, and that it is a safe space. And that's something that I've always tried to instill with anybody who's on my team. And I do that simply through one-on-ones. And I'm asking them, how are you? What's going on? And I try to get a little bit personal to know as well what might be impacting you that's not work-related.
Yeah.
And I also think another thing that's important is, especially with respect to difficult situations in the workplace, is for the leader to understand the right course of action. Because I've worked at organizations where, for instance, the human resources department is a safe haven, and they're trustworthy, and you can come to them with things like that. And unfortunately, I've worked at places where that hasn't been the case. So how, as a leader, if you have a situation, can you placate something on the team in the absence of an HR department? So this, I think, takes a little bit of wisdom, understanding people, empathy, and taking into consideration the person's wish for how they would like things to unfold. Maybe they just wanted to vent, you know, maybe they don't want you to do something and they just wanted to let it out.
Yeah. I like the first point that you made, building an environment of trust where everyone can come to you and talk about the problems or anything that they faced or any situations that came up. Because I believe, if there's an environment where people are simply worried if they tell that an inappropriate comment was made, that they have probably to face any setbacks or and not the person who was actually doing the harm. So I absolutely agree with that. In terms of decisions that you have to make, you mentioned at the beginning that I believe making the decision to decide who has to be made redundant is probably I can imagine a very tough decision, because you are deciding about someone's future, maybe even about their family's circumstances in the next couple of weeks or even month. What are maybe another tough decision that you had to make, and what have you learned from it?
All the tough decisions I've had to make, when I think about it, actually come down to having to let people go. I think because it is such a personal thing. As you rightfully just said, you likely know the person in terms of their personal life, if they have kids, if they're married, if they're getting married soon, or paying off a student debt. So, of course, all of these things are very difficult to take into an account. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not a robot. You know, we're human. We have emotions, and it's, of course, now more interesting since I have been in that position myself. I haven't faced it again yet since to see would I have to let anyone go, but I'm curious to know if my own situation would infiltrate that decision-making process. But at the end of the day, when it came to the tough decision of having to let people go, not just with my previous employer, but I've faced this at multiple employers where I had to let somebody go. And in one instance in particular, there was a bit of drama between two girls on the team, or two women on the team. And they were both at the same level. They were both within the same department. And basically each one in our one-on-ones was sharing something negative about the other. Oh, wow. It felt like a he said, she said kind of situation. And so as the weeks went on, I found myself trying to unpack what I was being told by each person and understand, okay, well, person one can't be 100% true. Person two can't be 100% true. The truth has to lie somewhere in the middle. And at the end of the day, I had to select one person to let go, because unfortunately the situation was permeating throughout the organization, and that negative energy was starting to impact other team members, and it was also starting to reflect in the quality of work being done. And so for this particular decision, although it was tough because I knew that neither of them were telling me the whole story, I had to simply equate it down to the performance and look at the output of each individual and look at past performance and really make an evaluation based on the growth of each person, as well as looking at their potential. And when you make these kind of decisions, that's where, when it is a tough decision, you have to take out the emotional side and you have to think business, because at the end of the day, it is a business. You're not running a non-for-profit. It's not a charity. And you're also measured on your goals, and to be an effective leader, unfortunately, that sometimes means making those difficult decisions that have the greater good of the company in mind.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Sometimes there are decisions to be made, and these decisions are tough, but they have to be done. So thank you for sharing that. What advice would you give women aspiring to leadership roles, especially in male-dominated industries?
I have 2 pieces of advice. First, build your network, especially internally. Build your network with both men and women, be it with peers that are at your same level, be it with people that are at lower levels, but also at more senior levels. That way you have a team of advocates as well as mentorship to help guide you. Secondarily, embrace the fact that you are a woman. This is a unique quality. There are so many wonderful things about being a woman, but also do the role. I have seen many times where men who want to be promoted into leadership positions, they naturally start doing that role. They naturally start taking the lead. They naturally start doing the requirements of that new role, where I haven't really seen women do the same. And so that's probably the most important advice that I would give to women is don't wait for the promotion to be told that you can start doing these job functions. Step up to the plate, start doing them, and demonstrate your capability. And then you're in the perfect position to advocate for your promotion by saying, listen, I have already been doing 1, 2, 3, 4, which are the exact qualifications for this next position. And I've achieved this by doing that. And that's a very solid case that whoever you report into then has something that they can present to whoever is needing to approve it and substantiate the promotion.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to promote someone if they have already proven that they can do certain things and they have stepped up and they have been doing the task that is required for the next role. You mentioned building a network, having mentors, people in higher positions within the company, but maybe also outside. Were there any specific people that have influenced your path? Or did you have any role models or mentors?
Yes. When I worked in New York, the GM of the company was actually somebody that I aspired to. She was the leader of the company at 34 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I was extremely impressed by that because that's quite a young age to be in such a leadership position. And she really inspired me because she told me something that has stuck with me to this day. And that was, don't be afraid to make the decision. She said, Stacy, just make the decision and do it. Don't wait for anybody to tell you yes. Don't ask if it's okay. Just do it. And you know what? If it ends up being the wrong decision, you can apologize later. And I really appreciated that because it was kind of the kick that I needed. I was at a pivotal point in my career where I was a bit of a leadership role, but I obviously aspired to grow even higher. And her saying that made me feel like, okay, I should have the confidence to just go for it. And then another person who really inspired me was also a woman in the workplace, and she was a French woman, actually. And I really admired how she was able to totally multitask. I mean, she had a family and she had kids, and she came in sharply every day from 9 to 5. She always left on time. But wow, what she got done during the day, it was incredible. And so seeing that and understanding, different skills that she had for being as efficient as possible with her time was also a motivating factor for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's really great. I like the first one with just make a decision, because if you don't make a decision, things get delayed and no one else will make the decision. And she's right. If you're wrong, at least you have learned from it. You got the experience. If you're right, great, and you will move forward. So,
Yeah.
So when you got laid off and you were suddenly without a 9-to-5 job, how was it being at home? Did you fight with your husband? You mentioned you have your mother. So what was going on at home?
Actually, my husband was extremely supportive, and he said that, frankly, it was the best thing that could ever happen to me, because towards the end of my time there, I was incredibly stressed out. I could feel the pressure, and he really didn't like seeing me day in, day out, living that way. And so he was very supportive. But that being said, because I was so adamant and insistent about, gosh, I can't be unemployed, I need to find something else. It did cause a little bit of tension, because he was really trying to encourage me to take a break, unplug, don't do anything, you're doing too much. And so I would say, actually, it ended up being a really good balance. And I think I'm extremely fortunate that I have that support system, and that he was so supportive, and I didn't have to, immediately find something else. But it was hard internally, as I said, to deal with it, because it really did rip down my self-esteem. And even to this day, I've had a tough time with publicly saying it. However, the more that I say it, the more I have found a community. I mean, like you said, I actually didn't know that it's happened to you twice. And so now I feel more connected even with you, which is really great, to know that you're not alone, and there's other people out there that it has happened to, and try the best you can to pick up the pieces and become a better version of you.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think it happened to more people than we probably know. And but yeah, you're right. It's like a community. You feel, that the person went through the same as you went through. And at the end of the day, what you learn is it's not the end of the world. It is a tough time, but you can always get up and learn from it and move forward. So your boss, the lady that told you that your pretty face, your good looks won't take you anywhere. I think it was one of your first roles. If you would meet that lady today, what would you tell her?
I would let her know that particular conversation struck a chord with me. So much time, to your point, has passed that I don't feel a type of way about it anymore. It doesn't impact me, which is a great thing. But I would tell her that. And if I had to guess, I think that she would tell me that she didn't intend for it to be received in a particular way. And I would let her know, though, that despite the negative connotation that it had, and that negative repercussion that it had with me, I turned it into a positive. And I would tell her how I used that to fuel my confidence even more, to overcome challenges and prove her wrong. And that's something that has always been a core of who I am as an individual. I'm an eternal optimist. I don't see obstacles. I believe that when there's a will, there's a way. And so when there are negative things entering my life, like this comment, I actually usually use it to fuel me to demonstrate even more that that's not who I am, and that I do deliver great work.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stacy, for joining this conversation and sharing your experience as well, your personal stories with me. I think it was very inspiring, and I could really relate to all of your stories, especially the ones with the redundancy, the comments that have been made because of your looks. And how you overcame them. So thanks a lot for joining and sharing these. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned and see you next time.